especially the Battle of Gettysburg. In 1865, at the age of 26, he was promoted to Major General. And he was, you know, when General Lee surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, Custer was there. He was there. What did he have? A big ego. And what did he love? He loved the media. Because the media was a new thing, right? They had media covering the Civil War. You saw the movie. John Geyser was an artist for Harper's Weekly, which was a big-time newspaper during the Civil War. And the media really liked Custer. And they referred to him as the darling of the Northern Press. They referred to Custer as the darling of the Northern Press. Gave him a huge ego. He always had newspaper men with him during his campaigns because he wanted the word out. Okay? Well, after the Civil War and his great successes and after his promotion to Major General, he married a lady by the name of Elizabeth Bacon. Elizabeth Bacon, better known as Libby by her friends and family. Okay? He married Elizabeth Bacon, better known as Libby to her friends and family. And man, this guy was in love. I'm not kidding you. He may rival Kyle Lamb. Anyway, but he made a fool of himself one night. Kyle's never done anything like this. Now, in the old days, you had to court a little bit. In other words, you just didn't say, "Hey, you want to go out, Megan?" Yeah. Then you're all. I mean, you got to court a little bit. You got to ask Dad's permission. You got to court a little bit. You got to kind of make a move. You can't just, you know, it's just not quick at getting the gal to go with you and court her. Well, he was courting her one night, and he was trying to get her attention, but he got all drunked up, and he started tossing little rocks at her window to try to get her attention so she'd talk to him, which was kind of a no-no in those days. Okay, so he got all drunked up one night while he was courting Elizabeth Custer, and he was tossing rocks at her bedroom trying to get her attention. And she really got on him. She chastised him beyond belief for his inappropriate behavior. And at that point, Custer took an oath that he would never drink again. Never drink again. Because, you know, military guys drank. That's what they did. And after that episode, when he was trying to court Elizabeth Custer drunked up one night, she chastised him for an inappropriate behavior, and he took an oath of never to drink again. Now, Custer's relationship with his wife and her relationship with him was just wonderful. They loved each other very, very much. There was never, you know, any doubt about that. And Custer made efforts to be with her anytime he could during his military career, no matter what it might cost him. Okay? If he felt something was wrong, or she was in danger, or something was not right in his mind, he would just take off and go see her. Okay? Now, family was very, very important to George Custer. I'll give you some examples of his family. Very, very important. He had two brothers, Tom and Boston Custer. Tom and Boston Custer, two brothers. He had a brother-in-law, obviously, that was married to his sister Margaret, that he adored. His name was James Calhoun. So he had a very favorite brother-in-law married to his sister Margaret, a guy by the name of James Calhoun, very close to James Calhoun. And he had a special nephew by the name of Audie Reed. Audie Reed. So family was important to Custer. He had two brothers, Tom and Boston. He had a very important brother-in-law to him, and James Calhoun, and he had a very special nephew by the name of Audie Reed. Unfortunately, all four will perish with Custer at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. All four will perish with him. Well, after the Civil War was over, the Army dropped Custer from a Major General to the rank of Captain. Why? Anybody know why? No? Good guess.
Anytime they didn't know what to do, just charged.
No? Why'd they move him down? Kind of. They had promoted so many soldiers at such a rapid pace that they had too many chiefs and not enough Indians, so to speak. Too many commanders than they needed. So he wasn't the only one. Many Civil War Union commanders were dropped in rank after the Civil War because they had promoted people too fast, okay, and they had too many commanders. So he was dropped down to captain. Did it bother him? Yes. Did he understand it? Yes. Okay, so they got busted back. Well, in July of 1866, Congress passed a law called the Army Act of 1866. And what this did is it formed the Frontier Army, the army that would patrol the frontier. Okay, and what do they need armies to patrol the frontier? Because of these settlers moving westward and providing protection. So in July of 1866, Congress passed the Army Act of 1866. It formed the Frontier Army. And what was one of the more famous regiments of the Frontier Army? The 7th Cavalry. Okay? So among the regiments of the Frontier Army, most known was probably the famous 7th Cavalry. And who was given command of the 7th Cavalry? George Armstrong Custer. And he was given command in November of 1866. And he arrived at Fort Riley, Kansas to assume command.
What is?
November of 1866, Custer was given command of the 7th Cavalry of the new Frontier Army, and he arrived in November at Fort Riley, Kansas, to assume command of the 7th. Now, has the 7th made any reputation yet? What are the 7th made of? People that were in the army before, maybe, you know what I mean? From the Civil War ended in 1865. Now, when Custer arrived at Fort Riley, he took a look at his 7th Cavalry, and they were in horrible, poor condition for 3 reasons. 3 reasons why this army he inherited sucked, I guess would be your term, okay? Why they were in such poor condition. Why do you think? Think about what type of people did he have in the 7th Cavalry? Think about it. No, that's not, it's a good guesses. What type of soldiers did he have? What? Not so much untrained. What? What? Well, infantry, but where'd they come from? All of a sudden he inherited. Where'd they come from? Which part of the Civil War? Came from the South, believe it or not. Because he had a very large number of Confederate soldiers. Where the hell did they have to go after the war? I mean, their homes are burnt, their lives are disarray, all they know is the army. So what did they do? They joined the new Frontier Army. So a lot of the soldiers that he had in the 7th Cavalry were Southerners. Okay? He also, number 2, had an abundance of foreign soldiers. Where'd these foreign soldiers come from? They immigrated over here during the Civil War. And where'd some of them fight for? Which side? South. Remember the South was trying to get help from foreign countries? Okay? So he had a bunch of foreign soldiers, many who could not speak English. Okay, and who were the 3rd faction? He had some officers, but what type of officers did he have? What? Not so much old, but mad. Why are they mad?
They lost.
They got busted down just like he did. And some of them didn't really think that they should be under Custer's command. Okay? So Custer's got an army with an abundance of foreign soldiers. He's got an army with a number of Confederate soldiers. No place to go after the Civil War. And he's got soldiers that were military officers that were upset over the loss of life. Now I want to get back to kind of what Grace was saying. She said infantrymen, and she wasn't trying to be wrong. But this is the 7th Cavalry. So these are all cavalrymen, horsemen, okay? And they came from Confederate Army, foreign soldiers, and officers that were upset. So the 7th Cavalry was in need of fixing. That's why they gave Custer the command, because he knew how to do that, okay? So Custer wasn't given this command by mistake. They knew the 7th Cavalry needed fixing. Was it the famous 7th Cavalry right now? No, it was terrible. But Custer's going to fix them. Now, he had the reputation as like the head coach, maybe, that's going to work your men pretty hard. Okay, we're going to run you pretty hard. And what happens if you get a bunch of kids out for football and a hard-nosed coach comes in, or volleyball or any other sport, you get a hard-nosed coach, that runs you to death, what's going to happen? Some are going to quit. You don't quit the army. What do you do when you take off? You desert. Okay? And so during one point in his command, 15 men deserted in broad daylight on Custer. You just don't do that in the army. Huh? 15 deserted in broad daylight. God, at least you'd think if you were going to try to desert, you might try to sneak out at night. These guys were so fed up with Custer and his routine that they deserted in broad daylight. So what did Custer do? He sent soldiers to retrieve them. Because you cannot do that. And you know what his orders were to those soldiers? You're ordered to shoot them. Don't kill them. Shoot them and bring them back. Don't kill them though. Just shoot them. And this was standing orders during the Civil War. If somebody deserted in the Civil War, you shot them and brought them back. Well, many deserters were shot. Of those 15, not all of them, but many were. They were brought back. And what's the first thing when they were brought back you'd think would happen?
Discipline.
Well, what would happen before that? They were shot. Yeah, they'd take them and have the doctor treat them. Custer said no. So many deserters were shot and brought back to command, where Custer refused the surgeon to perform any medical treatment. And I'll tell you, those guys suffered, and some even died of their wounds because he would not allow them to be treated. Needless to say, what slowed down considerably after that? Desertion. Yeah, desertion. So needless to say, desertion ceased from that point on. They never had any more. Well, I mentioned this to you before, and we'll finish with this. As Custer was training his men at Fort Riley, he had to take them off away from the fort at times. And who's at Fort Riley with him? Libby, his wife. Okay, so he took him way off Fort Riley and was training him. You don't train him right there necessarily. He was giving him some training in the field. And he received a dispatch from his wife saying that there was a serious sickness among the people back at Fort Riley. And that people were getting sick and dying. He sent a dispatch to her husband, who was training the men in the field. And so what did he do? He took off without permission to see Libby. And he took some soldiers with him and some wagons with supplies. But he did not have permission to abandon his post, did he? To go back to see his wife? Well, on the way back, he stopped at Fort Wallace and Fort Hayes. And finally, he arrives at Fort Riley to see his wife without permission to leave his post. As a result of that, he was put on military trial for 3 things. He was put on military trial for 3 things. What was he? 1? Leaving, well, they didn't call it deserting, but leaving his post without orders. That was one thing he was tried for. Means he took wagons and soldiers when he shouldn't have. Do you think maybe he got in trouble for misuse of government supplies? Right? Took them without permission also. So he got in trouble for leaving his post without orders, misuse of government supplies. And what's the last thing he got in trouble for when people found out about it? Abuse of his men. Abuse of his men. So Custer was brought up on charges and tried for leaving his post without orders, misuse of government supplies, and abuse of his men. It doesn't really matter, but I'll tell you, he stopped at Fort Wallace and Fort Hayes. Now, so at the conclusion of the trial, he asked to speak on his own behalf, which he did. Unfortunately, he was convicted of those 3 charges and court-martialed. Now, when you're court-martialed, what happens to you? You get suspended from the military or expelled. It's kind of like school. Either suspend you for 10 days or expel you if you do something naughty. Well, he got court-martialed and he got suspended for 1 full year from the military without pay. 1 full year without pay. He's 27 years old when this happens. 27. And what does he do after he gets suspended? Where does he go? He went back where? What? home to Monroe, Michigan, very depressed man with his wife. So at 27 years old, Custer returns with Libby to their hometown of Monroe, Michigan. He's very depressed. I want you to listen to this. Who comes to his defense and writes a letter to President Grant to lift Custer's suspension? Who? Close? No? Somebody said that he might have been somebody he was assigned to. General March to the Sea Sherman. Excuse me, I should have said Sheridan. General Sheridan, sorry, wrote to Grant and asked him to reinstate Custer. Why? Why does he want him reinstated? Because he wants him to be part of what? These preparations being made, known as the Campaign of 1876. So just 11 months after his suspension, he had a month left, General Grant reinstates Custer. Okay? Which will take us to our subtopic tomorrow, which is Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer back in command. So you understand what happened here? Philip Sheridan went to his defense to get him reinstated because he wanted to get him back in the saddle for this campaign. Yes, he does stop at 4 days. Yeah, he does. Okay, now, Custer's going to screw up again before the campaign of 1876. And we'll tell you about that too. Okay? So, Lieutenant George Custer back in command tomorrow. From what?